What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Taylor Talks Wrestling. I'm joined by Fuego del Sol. Fuego, man, how's it going? Thank you for joining me.
What's up? What's up, man? How you doing,
I'm
Adam?
living, man. I'm living, getting ready for Full Gear tomorrow. Then we've obviously got SmackDown. I'll wake up with SmackDown overnight here, so I get SmackDown tomorrow morning. Full Gear Sunday morning. I got a full weekend of wrestling. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I also have a full weekend wrestling. I'll be resting in two different spots down in Texas, and I'll also be trying to catch up in the hotel rooms on all the wrestling
I,
as
I
well.
just what you got to take the laptop and just stream it.
Yeah, I got hopefully it depends on the hotel. Some hotels have a nice AirPlay system where I could get my phone involved and use it that way. But I also don't mind just because I travel so much, just watching stuff on my phone. I will watch whole shows all over my phone.
Yeah, whatever works, works, right? You just gotta fit in where you get in. That's the only way it can be.
Absolute,
So I want to. You
absolutely.
just mentioned you got two shows over the weekend, two different spots in Texas, which leads us in perfectly because you're back on the indie circuit now. You've kind of moved away from your time with AEW. And how are you balancing like the different? Like you said, you got multiple shows this weekend. How are you balancing being everywhere? And like, what does that mean for your long term and medium term goals?
I mean, I feel like the long term goals haven't changed much. It's a lot more on my own self to get myself booked, right? There's just a convenience that comes with being signed. They send you the money every 2 weeks, bi-weekly paychecks, and they set up all your travel for you. Where now I have to communicate with bookers and promoters and align travel and figure out where I'm staying and who's gonna take me where, if I'm flying in, if I'm driving in, negotiating prices back and forth, if there's meet and greets, if there's not meet and greets, can I sell merch, can I not sell merch, different avenues that all come with being an independent contract, independent professional wrestler. But I love it. I feel like that's part of the grind, especially trying to hit those long-term goals. I need to be wrestling and on the road as much as possible, especially to just keep me fed and keep my bills paid. I do this as a full-time job. I also am an entrepreneur in other avenues. I have other side projects, but this is my real full-time job, and I've made it my mission after leaving AEW to keep this as my full-time job and make primarily all my money from pro wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a full time freelancer, so I understand like that's some pressure. A lot of pressure comes with that because, as you said, everything's on you. From if you're not proactive, then you're going to go a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, no work. So I understand the pressure that comes with that, and when you chase your dreams and give yourself no other option other than like when everyone's like, oh, you need a backup plan. Make sure you've got a strong. To me, that's a cop out, right? Like, if I've got a backup plan, I'm not 100 on this because if I'm 100 on this, I don't believe I need a backup plan. Is that the similar mentality as what you're kind of running
I
with?
agree. I agree. I feel like I'm going to run pro wrestling until the wheels absolutely fall off. Because I just know how passionate I am about it and how there's just something about me all my life. If I put my mind to something, I can become successful at it. I
Yeah.
will make a way. I will find a way to do it. And I feel like you can't have a backup plan. I feel like you're setting yourself up for failure when you set up a backup plan like that. But sometimes if you're not all in, you need a backup plan. However, I'm all in on this and there is no backup plan. This I'm going to be in wrestling for the rest of my life, whether I'm just wrestling, training, producing, commentating, anything. I will find a way to stay around in wrestling till the day I
And
die.
that's the best way to be because then you are just hyper focused. You can manifest that way. Talking about, you've mentioned some of the differences that you've got already, negotiating with your prices, dealing with promoters yourself, travel. When, especially like the majority of wrestling fans are the big two, right? WWE, AEW back in the day, WCW. Some people may dabble with Ring of Honor before Tony Khan purchased it, or with New Japan, but primarily the big two. So, what are some of the major differences like that fans wouldn't be aware of from being part of an indie promotion compared to being part of? And I don't even like calling it the majors because I feel like that's hella disrespectful. But like
I would say, I would say, what just the variety and the. I wouldn't say it's disrespectful because I feel like when it comes to just the machine that is promotion and notoriety, they are the big two, right? They are going to come. If you like pro wrestling, you probably like only one of those two, or you might not even really fully be aware of what all is on the indies. And I feel like, uh, even though sometimes the quality of wrestler does not change between the two, there is a difference in quality of production and promotion between the two. And so it's a lot harder I might have an incredible match on a GCW this weekend, and I don't know, 10,000 people know about it, whereas I could have a squash match on Rampage and 1 million people know about it. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things to where it's a slower grind, but I feel like in ways it's more rewarding when you do eventually get to one of the big two, or, someone like Colt Cabana, who made a living on indie wrestling before he ever made it to one of the big two. It's possible to grow your fan base so large that you can make a good living on the indies, but there's a huge difference in just the promotion and notoriety. I remember Jeff Hardy did an interview years and years ago when he was in TNA for like 6 years, and he said he would meet people in a supermarket and they just be like, man, when you gonna wrestle again? And he's like, I've been wrestling every weekend. You just don't know about it because you don't watch TNA. And I think that's the biggest difference too, is just because back in the early 2010s, right, when WWE was all really you had you were almost starving for great wrestling matches. You weren't getting that on a weekly or monthly basis. So you went out looking for the New Japans and the Ring of Honors and the PWGs of the indies. And now, after AEW started up and then, Black and Gold era NXT, they kind of swallowed up all of that great indie talent. Thankfully, a lot of great indie talent has reemerged lately. But now you have great wrestling matches every single day of the week on television for free. So you're not necessarily looking to go find indie wrestling like you used to. And even like the most hardcore wrestling fans are almost burned out because good pro wrestling is oversaturated in the market right now. That doesn't mean there's not money to be made. I go to shows all over the country, big and small. Indie promotions are selling out, are getting good numbers of houses. They're still doing well for their small towns. There's just the notoriety of indie wrestling is not as big as it used to be.
Yeah, so it's like you can go to a town and it's known there, but then if you mention that event 2 towns over, nobody has a clue what's going on, right?
Exactly.
We get over here in the UK, I'm over in like the center of the country in a place called Birmingham. We get this indie company that comes over every once or twice a year from Ireland. They usually bring like one big name at a time. So the last time I was there, John Moxley was there. They've had Eddie Kingston there. This time around, it was I think it was Dolph Ziggler. So they've always got these big names to bring everybody in. But like I speak to friends one town over and they have no idea that this is going on. And I'm like, dude, there's like huge names along with like some really good indie talent coming. So I understand that. It must be, but as you said, like if you grow that indie fan base to a point where you're just undeniable, then there's a world where you can kind of become this independent wrestler that's making just as much money as if you was in one of the big two, right?
Absolutely. And, you're luckily now you have promotions like New Japan or Impact Wrestling that allow you to do indies as well. And AEW to an degree, but they kind of cut back on that since the introduction of Collision on Saturdays. But you have guys like Speedball Mike Bailey can be on television this week with Impact, but then also go and do a ton of dates with GCW or other smaller indies all around the U.S. And so that helps supplement the income in a big way. And that's what I like about the landscape of professional wrestling right now. But it's just much harder to build that fame and notoriety, right? You've got guys that are on New Japan that have a fraction of the followers that someone else in AEW, a small behind-the-scenes role guy in AEW might have, just because of the sheer notoriety of how big the marketing and promotion is with the big two.
Talking of the big two and the indies, obviously WWE's ID deal was all over the place the last few weeks. A lot of people still aren't fully clued up on what that could mean long-term for talent. Is that going to be a good thing? Is that going to be a bad thing? And there's both ways to look at that argument, right? Like you can look at it from cultivating talent to stockpiling talent and doing everything to kind of crush other companies, but not lift up the wrestlers themselves. Where are you kind of like, what do you see with this ID deal? Do you think it's good for the industry? Do you see it as being a neutral for the industry, maybe bad? And like, what are your takes on the whole ID deal?
I feel like I'm a wait and see guy first and
Yeah.
foremost, right? Right now, it's absolutely phenomenal for publicity standards, right? WWE creating this Twitter account and people are all wondering who's the next. They're promoting the indies. It's good for the business right now. Long term, I feel like we have to wait and see. However, since NXT 2.0 kind of started,
Yeah.
they have kind of took the focus off of hiring indie wrestlers. And AEW kind of took over, as in hiring the hot new indie wrestler type people. And so you really haven't had an avenue to get to WWE as an indie wrestler for at least a good year and a half. They did an independent wrestling tryout in September of 2023. So over a year since they've hired real indie talent. And then you saw the women that they picked up in the past several months with the Stephanie Vackers and the Julias and the Zaras of the world. And so it's like, they finally have decided to pick up on indie talent, and they finally launched this WWE ID program, which is good because they're not just hiring the top indie talent. They're picking up people that did just random seminars all around the country, guys you've never heard of, women you've never heard of. And that's great because back just a couple years ago, you had to have the top social media following. You had to be working for one of the big independent wrestling companies. You had to get an opportunity at a tryout or a AEW dark match to even get on people's radar. And now you don't need any of that. If you just put the tools together, say you're only wrestling in your small little state, say like a state like Kansas that has no major popular promotions. A state like Kansas, if you get really good and wrestle all around Kansas and get your body in order and cultivate a character or your promo ability, and then Gabe Sapolsky runs a seminar in Kansas City and you get noticed and you stand out, and now you can get signed to WID without a big social media following, without wrestling for any big companies. It has opened the door. It has broke the seal on what was needed to get noticed. Now you don't need any of that to get noticed. You just got to be good. And now, if you're good and can get the right eyes in front of you, you can get signed, which opens the floodgates for indie wrestlers around. It should be inspiring and motivating, and you have a more clearer path to get to WWE if that's your goal. And I think that's great. You know, if it leads fans to following these people on social media to follow their path, if it leads to them getting to come down to NXT for a week and train and get on a level up or NXT, that's phenomenal. Like all of this, plus it's just good business. If you can make money and still work the indies, say it's a small contract. I don't have no clue what the contracts look like for WID. But if it's even $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, plus the indie dates that you pick up along the way, you can make a good living off of just the WWE ID program, and they're focused on you and giving you tools and advice and critiques to get better. I think that is overall the best. But again, I don't know what all it entails, but right now for publicity standards, it looks really well.
And
it looks phenomenal.
My opinion on it as well is building on what you've just, like everything you've kind of just articulated. The other aspect for me is you define what success looks like to you, right? Like you could be picked up by this WWE ID deal. You could do a year, 2 years with WWE, have all this training, all this extra work in how you deliver promos, how you get fans on side, operate as a face, and then if it doesn't work out for you, well, your cachet within the industry, now you can go and land in a New Japan or in a GCW, but be one of their top higher earners because you've already built this reputation on the biggest wrestling platform there is. So it also gives talent an opportunity to be like, hey, okay, maybe it didn't work out right now. And obviously there's always this talk of if you really want to pop in WE, you need to go there, leave, and then come back for them. And like, that's kind of like, you look at a lot of the talents there, that's kind of how it goes. It's giving opportunities for people to not crash out, but have softer landings when things don't go their way during a run. Do you see that happening as well?
In a sense, yeah. I mean, I got released from AEW last year, and I had to kind of land on my feet the best I could. And thankfully, I got a ton of just random indie bookings, but also GCW became like a mainstay for me. And so I got to go there and kind of prove and earn some indie cred because I really wrestled on small, unknown indies before AEW. I really didn't get put on the map until AEW signed me. So I've been able to go and earn street cred by wrestling much longer matches against really good opponents and kind of letting people know that I can go. And if that's the case for the WWE ID deal as well. Is if it leads to more bookings for people, even post their ID contracts, that's a great thing for the business and for them.
I mean, GCW, I was looking at their roster page earlier today. There's some big names there. So the question I've kind of got is, what's that like wrestling against these guys? Because you're going up against, like, Cardona's incredibly experienced. You're going up against some great talent, but also is there networking that's going on there as well, where you kind of fall into, hey, I'm going to this show. Do you want? They've got some openings. Maybe I can hook you up.
Absolutely. I feel like you want people to bring eyes to your product, right? And Matt Cardona is the king of self-promotion. And like, no matter where he goes, he's going to bring eyes with him and he's going to elevate your brand. And I think that the people like that help the overall product. But I think GCW is this era's ECW in a lot of ways, because you get great wrestling, you get great hardcore stuff, there's the ultimate mix of like maybe guys that got released and need a place to come to kind of revamp themselves, like a Cardona or a Jinder Mahal. Then you got guys on the indies that maybe no one's ever heard of, but they popped off in this town. We're coming to Phoenix this week, and this is Phoenix's best wrestler. And now he goes out there and has a match with George Janela, and they kill it. And now he's on the map as a guy that you might need to be watching, right? It's the perfect mix of everything. Plus, they're a traveling brand. Most independents stick to one town. They're traveling all over the United States. They'll be in London in January. They were just in Japan last August. They go to Mexico. They travel everywhere. Legitimately, they're the biggest independent wrestling promotion in the world right now. They kind of replaced PWG and Ring of Honor in a way, and like took over the top spot as an indie in the U.S. Even though they don't give contracts, your own shows with these guys, which brings more eyes to you and your product. And hopefully, with a traveling brand like that, you can incorporate a little bit more story, where most of the time with the indie, you're really just getting a random spot match with maybe not a lot of story. GCW provides you a chance to actually show a different side of yourself and show more of yourself and go in on a deeper level with stories, which I think is really necessary. I feel like nowadays we're spoiled that everybody can wrestle for the most part. If you're on a big show, you pretty much got it in the ring. What we're lacking is the promos and the storytelling ability. And that's where we need more work and more focus. And I think that's why I'm so glad that you have a big platform like GCW and big names that want to come work there to help bring those eyes to those stories and to those wrestlers.
If you're going to be there in London in January, let me know and I'll drive down there, man. I'll come and watch some GCW for sure.
Man, I got so lucky that I got to do my first ever UK tour earlier this year, and I was there for 3 weeks, and I wrestled for Rev Pro and a few other promotions in Norwich and in Wales and in Blackpool. So I got to travel around the UK a lot earlier this year, and I fell in love with it. So I really want to come back. I don't know if I'll be at the GCW one in London, but I definitely will make another tour of the UK and maybe even extend it to more countries in Europe next year.
Yeah, I mean, there's short flights wherever you want to go, right? You want to get to Spain, Italy, there's hour, 2 hours. It's not much. But definitely, man, because anytime like where I am in the middle of the country, I have to drive for wrestling 90% of the time anyway. So I'm cool to just jump in the car and see where it goes.
Yeah, I fell in love with y'all's public transport. I could bus wherever I needed to or train wherever I needed to. I was like, this is incredible. We don't have this. We're too big in the United States to get this type of luxury.
Dude, whenever I'm out stateside, it's rent a car or just eat the Uber fees. Like,
oof.
And I cover a lot of basketball. Like, that's kind of like my full-time field. Like, basketball and wrestling kind of at 1A and 1B for me. So, like, I remember being out in Boston covering a Celtics-Lakers game, and an Uber from the hotel to the TD Garden was $12, and Uber back was $85. And I was like, dude, I might...
Because all those people trying to leave the game at the same time.
Yeah, and like, I'd been there for the media after, so like I didn't leave till like 3 hours after the game finished because I was like, dude...
And it still was crazy.
I'm like, dude, I might as well just rented a car. It would have been the same price.
Yeah, it would have absolutely...
You know what I'm saying? And then I don't have to worry about tipping no one or... Oh, man, this is wild. Getting back on track. Definitely, if you're going to be out here for a while, definitely just stick with public transport. People here driving on the wrong side of the road. It's just it's a whole thing, man. Going back, so we've gone through your GCW, we've gone through your indies and your thoughts on the ID deal. So I just want to kind of finish up by touching on some of your time in AEW, and mainly like just starting off with what your favorite memories are from your time there. You had your matches with Miro, you had that whole like friendship with Sammy that went on, and there was like some vlogs that were happening, and it was just a fun time, right? But we don't see what's behind the scenes. Maybe it's what you was enjoying more was like traveling with guys or whatever. So just what are some of your favorite memories from your time there?
Oh, man. I feel like I really only scratched the surface in AEW, man. I was there for 2.5 years, but I would say really only if you count the year plus that we were in Jacksonville, I could basically say I was there for 3 years. But then when I got signed, I was only on the road for probably 8 months full time. So there's like a year and a half where I'm just sitting at home and waiting for flights to Orlando for AEW Dark matches every 5 weeks. And so it's just very random and all over the place. And so I feel like I never fully got to do what I wanted, but I had a couple great matches with Miro that I'm very proud of. I had a small feud with the House of Black that I feel like was good, but could have been great if we could have worked more with it. And, but probably my favorite thing of all is just doing the vlog every week with Sammy and the boys. Man, the vlog crew, me, Sammy, Griff, Garrison, Alan Angels, Marco Stunt, Aaron Solo at times. We would travel around and do different bits. And for a while there, we had QT Marshall and Cody Rhodes, a big part of the vlog. And so we would I would be able to play and do different bits with them and Dustin Rhodes. And it was so fun because, sometimes you don't know with a small YouTube thing if it will translate to the main audience. But slowly but surely it did. I gained such a large following and love that people were begging for me to get signed every week, and it eventually led to me getting signed. So that was incredible. And then I got to just get mentored by so many people I looked up to, man. I remember, I broke my foot around the same time that CM Punk had just come back from a foot injury. So he messaged me and kind of gave me a ton of advice and said if I needed to vent to him, I could. There were times where I would wake up at like 10 a.m. and go train with William Regal and Bryan Danielson. And it's like, that's mind blowing. I was at WrestleMania 30 when Danielson won both titles, at WrestleMania. So and I had just started wrestling right at that point. And so just how much I've looked up to a guy like him with similar sizes and mindsets to be able to train with him. It was like wrestling college. I felt like I was getting my PhD in pro wrestling. And those were the moments I looked at fondly the most, man. Becoming friends with people I looked up to, man. I studied the Bucks for so long, and for them to message me still to this day and check on me and talk to me about wrestling, that's the stuff that I'm very grateful for, because those are you desire the respect of your peers. Sometimes you don't get the respect of the booker or the boss. Sometimes you don't get the respect of the fans, but most importantly, you want the respect of your peers, because that goes the longest way after wrestling, I feel like. Luckily, I did. I was able to gain a lot of respect with the fans, and and I feel like Tony Khan liked me, but never loved me enough to get me on the spots that I really wanted to get to. But again, that's just business, and that's how business goes. No hard feelings at all there. But I'm very thankful for the fans and for the respect of my peers and people I looked up to all my life.
Man, you're dropping names, it's wrestling royalty, right? So even though,
Yes.
and this goes back to what we said earlier, where it's like, even if an opportunity doesn't work out and there's a bit of a softer landing, the opportunity, the networking that can come from that, the people that you got to learn from, do you feel like, for me personally, I feel like it's a silly question right now, but do you feel like you left AEW a better wrestler than the day you walked in just because of the mentorship?
Yes, I feel like that's a two-part answer. And if I'm being very honest, I wasn't wrestling every week. So I feel like my cardio got worse, in a sense of like I wasn't wrestling as much as I needed to wrestle. However, being there, when I got to AEW, I thought I was a good wrestler, but when you're a good wrestler and you're surrounded by the best wrestlers in the world, you feel much worse than you actually are. So it gave me a chance to see the examples that I want to get to. I get to be around a Kenny Omega, a Bryan Danielson, Hangman Adam Page. You see how hard they work, how hard they go in the gym, how early they show up, what they're doing to put together their matches, and how they are able to go full speed at the end of the match, just like they are at the beginning of the match. And it doesn't look like they're out of breath at all. That was the thing that I learned from them that made me a better wrestler overall. And it made me push myself when I got released. Okay, well, now I know what I need to do. And I feel like I've become a 10 times better wrestler since leaving AEW than I was when I was there. I'm having great matches everywhere I go. I have time, and I have the cardio, and I have the experience, and I know how to read a crowd, and I know how to play the cameras, and I know so much more now than I did beforehand. And not necessarily because I learned that in ring, but just on the job training, being around great examples made me a better wrestler.
So it kind of gave you the tools to then go and put that into becoming. So you didn't leave a better wrestler, but you left with the tools to become one.
To make me,
Yeah.
yes, a better wrestler. Absolutely.
And see, that alone is, one of the best outcomes you could have if it's not going to be the way you want it to be, and it's turning lemons into lemonade. That's one of your better
Absolutely.
outcomes.
I got to go back to AEW earlier this summer.
That was Roderick
and
Strong,
I did
right?
6 weeks. Yeah, I did 6 weeks. I did probably about 6 Ring of Honor matches and then 1 Rampage match as well. See, because Ring of Honor is stuck behind a paywall, a lot of people didn't even get to see all the work that I got to do in Ring of Honor, having 6 different matches. But they did see the Rampage squash match that I did with Roderick, which was very fun. We had even more time, but it got cut last minute as we were going out, so we kind of had to make the best of a bad situation. But yeah, man, I went back with so much more confidence going into it. I was in the best shape of my life. I was having the best matches of my life. If there was self-doubt the first time around in AEW of like, do I deserve to be a little bit of imposter syndrome? There was no imposter syndrome. There was no doubt this time around. And I felt like the best I've ever been. I really thought I was going to get re-signed. And even though we're good on speaking terms and we still negotiate a little bit back and forth here and there, nothing has come to fruition. But I felt 10 times better about my run this summer than I did than my first time going around.
And then you never say never. There could always be another time. I'm very conscious of time here, so I don't want to keep you much longer. There's one I want to go a little bit off track here, just because it's come to me as you were talking. And it's all I'm asking here is, what goes into a squash match in terms of like ego? So some people might not want to be in a squash match because, they want to get over with the crowd, or they want they want a longer match, or whatever it goes in. How much of a humbling experience, or how much what mentality do you have to go into a squash match with?
I think ego has hurt a lot of people's careers, especially in the past 10 years. I think my mindset going into any match is play the role that you are given to the best of your ability in hopes of earning a better role later. That's all I can do, right? I can only pick my spots. I was chosen to wrestle Hook in his first match ever on Rampage in 2022. And they chose me because they knew I can make him look good. And that is a feather in my cap. But then you only get okay, you're only going to have maybe 1 to 2 moves in this match, period. And so what do I do to make myself stand out? What do I do? Even if I feel like sometimes you feel like you're a better wrestler, you are getting better fan reactions, or you have a higher ceiling or more potential than certain guys. You got to put all that to the side. You got to let your ego set aside. So no matter who I'm wrestling, if I'm wrestling the best of the best or the worst of the worst, or a celebrity coming in just to, help get more eyes on the product, you got to do what you got to do because that's what you're paid to do, right? You want to make the boss happy at the end of the day. If you can make the boss happy, you can make more money and stick around a lot longer. However, there is your own ego and your own personal aspirations. And you feel like you want to take steps in the right directions to go higher up on the card if that is your goal. Some people don't have that goal. And it almost fights against itself when you're stuck in those situations, because if you're really great at taking an ass whooping, then you're only going to be known as the guy. I remember I just heard a Ricochet interview recently where he was like, they would tell him, hey, you got this match on Raw tonight, or hey, you got this many minutes. Can you find a way to lose in a spectacular fashion? He was like, yeah, I keep doing spectacular things, but I keep losing, and that's not what I wanted. And I just became the spectacular losing guy, and I don't want that. And in a way, that's how I feel it is. And I feel like you got to show off what tools you have, right? And I feel like people know now that I can be funny on YouTube vlogs. People know that I can bump and sell my ass off. I'm a phenomenal bumper. I'm a phenomenal seller. I can do that and make anybody look good, make them look better than you think they look. But I want to show off all the other aspects, my offensive work, my creativity, my promo ability, my confidence, all of that. I feel like I have so many tools in my tool belt, and I've only used hammers and nails lately. And I got so many other tools that I can bust out and show that haven't been able to be seen by the major market, the the promotions and the eyes that AEW brings in, the people that know of me probably have rarely ever seen full matches of mine. And if they have seen full matches of mine, it's the 3, 4, 5 minute squash matches that they've seen of me. They don't even know that, hey, Fuego can go. They don't even know that Fuego can talk. They don't know any of this. And so that's what I've been working towards to get better at it. So you have to set your ego aside, but you also have to know when to pick your spots and pick your moments. You know, they say the 2 C's is what ruin a relationship between a booker and promoter: cash or creative. Those are the 2 C's. So sometimes it's about money, and sometimes it's just because you feel like you want more and you're not getting it where you're at. But that comes with time. I feel like I am my own biggest critic, and I also know I'm fully aware of what I lack and what weaknesses I do have and what I need to change about myself. That's one of the reasons I put so much work into putting on so much muscle in the past 3 or 4 years. Man, I knew I needed to look like a threat if you want to be a threat. I knew you need to look like a TV star if you want to be a TV star. And so those are the things I have been working on personally to make myself and to get to where I want to be. I love Sammy Guevara's mindset on this. He's like, when I step through the curtain or when the red light is on, I'm the best wrestler alive. I'm the best wrestler in the room. When I come back through the curtain, I'm just like everybody else. And that's the way your ego needs to. Let your ego shine in the ring or in front of the camera. Don't let your ego shine in the back or dealing with other people.
Honestly, that was probably one of the best answers I've ever had. And that question, when you're talking and you're like, oh, I'd really like to know the answer to this. So that was dope, just hearing that. I'm conscious of time, so I just want to wrap up with this. And this was I enjoyed reading this tweet from you the other day. For anyone watching on YouTube, I'll post it. You'll see it pop up on the screen in a moment. It was basically along the lines of, you listed Bryan Danielson. Let me find the tweet, actually, because then I can read it verbatim. Because I feel like I'm doing you a disservice otherwise. And I'm not about that. I try and be as positive as possible. So there are some wrestlers that are so cool or wrestle in a way that's so mesmerizing that their physique doesn't matter. Regardless of size or stature, they make you believe they can win any match against any opponent. You named Jeff Hardy, Rey Mysterio, Bryan Danielson, Eddie Kingston, who's one of my personal favorites. I think he's just got that, right? Like, you can imagine him being in a street brawl in a Brooklyn alley coming out of a bar. Then you go Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, Darby Allin, etc. So those, a lot of everyone you kind of listed there, obviously Jeff Hardy, Rey Mysterio, part of the old school and the new school in terms of like the Attitude Era. We're not going all in the Wayback Machine. But overall, who were like your top 3 or 4 favorite wrestlers of all time, going as far back as you want or staying as current as you want?
I'm very biased to guys that are smaller that made it into the main event scene, that wrestle in a way where you don't even notice their size. So, I mean, you look at him now, and I feel like the guys like Shawn Michaels, I remember when I was born in 95, right? So right during the Attitude Era was and at the back end of the Attitude Era is when I kind of really started understanding pro wrestling. So I love Steve Austin, because who didn't love Stone Cold at the time? But when I started to really understand wrestling is when Shawn Michaels came back in 2002 and just started having great matches over and over again. And he's not a giant, you know. He was always standing next to Triple H, who's, you know, gassed to the gills, jacked. But like, he was able to mesmerize you with his moveset. So Shawn, and then I was also watching TNA at the time, so AJ Styles just got me, you know, and those 2 guys were probably my 2 favorites until that next evolution of guys came, like Punk and like Danielson, man. Danielson and Punk were like idols to me at that time. I was like, oh, if I can get great on the mic, if I can get really good in the ring and really great on the mic, it doesn't matter what size I am, I can make it to the main event scene like I want to make it. And of course, I always loved the Hardy Boys too, and there was on and off periods where they would leave or come back or separate and get back together. So, I mean, but Jeff Hardy is like the epitome of that. I never once cared how much Jeff Hardy weighed. I don't care how tall or how much Jeff Hardy bench presses. Jeff Hardy is awesome. You know, at the end of the day, that's all you care about, right? And the same thing, I feel like Darby Allin is in a lot of ways like Jeff Hardy reincarnated, because he's got that factor about it. Darby Allin maybe weighs 150 pounds, but you would never know it, because he wrestles in a way that is so cool and so mesmerizing, throws so much caution to the wind that you believe he will kill himself in hopes to win this match. And that's the type of aura that you need. Like once you get that type of aura and prove yourself in a way, people forget about, oh, well, he doesn't have this or that necessarily. You look at a guy like Kevin Owens. I could give a damn how much Kevin Owens weighs or if he wrestles with his shirt off or on. Or he's a badass.
Yeah.
He can talk his ass off, and there's a visceral disdain for people when he's wrestling them. You can see it on his face that he believes that he hates this person or he's pissed off. He's such a great actor in that, to making you believe everything he says and does. Same thing with Samoa Joe. I could give a damn how much Samoa Joe weighs. He's just a badass in every sense of the word. I wouldn't want to be walking down a dark alley and bump into that motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? He's just that good. And so, like, in a way, I feel like I haven't developed that yet. I feel like I need to find that next part of my character, because for so long, people just cared about my size or talked about my size in a way, or my gimmick in a way that was goofy or associated with jobbing out and doing things of that nature. And so I let people know, hey, this is the way I look at wrestling and this is what I'm trying to get to, so that, and how I enjoy wrestling. Because I feel like so many, especially with the grifters and the cornets and the discos of the world nowadays that like to harp on these little things or these dumb things, it takes away from what makes wrestling cool. And sometimes it doesn't matter what you look like or what size you are, how much you bench press or how tall you are. Sometimes you're just that good.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about pro wrestling.
One of my, and we'll end it here, the earliest wrestling match I can remember watching, and I've just pulled it up here, once we finish this show, I'll show it you real quick, was WCW, I've got it here, 1999, so I think I was about 10 or 11 or something like that. Rey Mysterio versus Ric Flair. You got the ring, and then it's covered around the ring is like a swimming pool. So I don't know where it was, but I just remember it being dope because they got thrown in the pool at one point, and it was Rey Mysterio, young Rey Mysterio, small dude against like not prime, but like on the back end of his prime, Ric Flair, big, strong. And not once when I was a kid growing up watching that match, and I've watched that match 100, 200 times, did I ever think to myself, Rey Mysterio looks small here. I'm like, Rey Mysterio is fucking awesome right now because look what he's doing. So you are right. Like, you get to a point where your skill in that, like, I hate using this word, but that aura transcends everything else, man.
Yes. I think for sure. And like, a part of that is I feel like if you start watching as a kid, you're able to suspend disbelief better than if you're an adult coming in, because an adult just getting into wrestling has a certain bias and a certain magic that's already lost. You know, learning and watching it as a kid, you have a better and easier time suspending disbelief than I feel like if you're watching as an adult. So I think that's what the joys of watching early on as a kid does for you, especially if you stick with wrestling throughout your life, which is a great thing. But
I love it.
I know we didn't touch on this. I do want to talk about some of my long-term goals in the future. Number one goal is getting re-signed, getting back on TV, and showing what I can do storyline-wise. I feel like I only got to dip my toe in the storyline aspects of pro wrestling, and I feel like I am great at conveying emotions and conveying how I feel about certain subjects and all types of different emotions that I can convey, whether it be anger, sadness, joy, just being funny in general. I can do it all, and I can't wait to show that on a bigger stage. So building the muscle that I want to build, adding a few more pounds, showing off my pro mobility, getting back on TV, and traveling to Japan. Those are some of the biggest goals that I have right now, long-term in the future. And it's not a matter of if I hit them, it's just a matter of when, because that's how I believe.
I remember I was speaking with Mercedes Monet about 2 weeks ago. She was like the debut episode of this show. And one of the first questions I asked her was, what is it about Japan that just takes people and turns them into killers? Like Anna Jay being the most recent example, right? Like Anna Jay was good before she went to Japan, but she was like mid-card in that woman's roster. She goes away to Japan. She's away for a minute. She comes back and she just looks totally different. She's more explosive. She's got a more refined moveset. She's better on the microphone. And Mercedes was like, they just make you treat it like a job. You were training for 8 hours a day, every single fucking day. And eventually that it's going to pay off. So if you're going to get out to Japan and you've put some size on, and if you can get that opportunity to work with those guys, the track record's proven, right? I mean, most of the top talent in AEW right now have New Japan backgrounds. Will Ospreay, I'm biased because I'm English, but probably the most talented wrestler on the planet right now, and
Yeah,
New
absolutely.
Japan.
And I feel like not even that. Like if you go back even further, like Ricochet and Bucks had runs in DDT or Pro Wrestling Noahs of the world. Like just there's a toughness and a fire that the Japanese wrestling is necessary to have.
Yeah.
Like they preach it, they teach it in a way that you must show fire and you must show toughness in a way, and cardio. They harp on cardio so much that you don't get tired at the end of the match, so you can keep the veracity and the speed and the fire on your moves even at the end of the match. And I think that's what helped Anna Jay. She come back with a bigger fire and a stronger toughness that helps her now for the rest of her life. And I think that's what I love about Japanese wrestling, and that's what I want to go and experience firsthand.
Man, you're gonna kill it when you're out there, and when you do, like, I can get New Japan over here, so please just shoot me a message on Twitter, be like, "Yo, I'm wrestling on New Japan. I want to tune in for that. I want to watch that growth, and hopefully, maybe we jump back on here once you've had that experience, and we can talk about the way they trained you and kind of get some insight there." But I'll let you go. I promised you 30 minutes. We've ran for 40, so that's my bad. Before we go, I just want to say you're going to crush it. You've got a couple of indie gigs coming up, but it won't be long until you're over in Japan or you're signed again. I feel like you, especially as you said, that 6-week run and that match against Roderick Strong, you showed a lot. There's going to be an opportunity down the road, man. I appreciate you jumping on.
No problem. Yeah, tell people definitely GCW on Fight TV, Triller TV. If you got it, check it out. And if not, definitely just follow me on socials, man. You can check out my Instagram. You'll know what all my dates coming up. A bunch of highlights that I've done recently. You can keep up with everything Fuego Wrestling related on my Instagram or my Twitter account. So definitely hit me with the follows, and I appreciate you for having me on.
Anytime, man.